In the swirling storm of American politics, there are few figures who can capture attention, command headlines, and simultaneously spark ridicule quite like Donald Trump and his family. But sometimes the events unfolding around them are so absurd that they almost defy parody. That was the case when Donald Trump Jr. found himself back in court facing questions that would unravel not only his own credibility, but also the fragile public image of the family dynasty he so desperately tries to uphold. Protesters outside chanted crime, family, a label that is echoed through every scandal, lawsuit, and chaotic misstep attached to the Trump name. And in many ways, that label stuck, not because of the court filings alone, but because of how the Trumps responded awkwardly, defensively, and often in ways that turned them into caricatures of themselves. As Don Jr. stumbled through his testimony, grasping for excuses, trying to convince a courtroom that he wasn't responsible, the world watched with a mix of shock and laughter. His defense that he was merely a business guy, not an accountant, and couldn't be expected to know more than the professionals he hired. Yet, his nervous delivery, robotic hand gestures, and tendency to speak like a malfunctioning puppet didn't do him any favors. Instead of sounding like a competent executive, he sounded like a parody of one, a man caught in a role far too big for his abilities. And before we dive deeper into the surreal twist that followed from late-night comedy roastings to AI-fueled memes that spiraled into full-blown cultural revolt, I need to pause and remind you of something important. If you're watching this story unfold and want to keep following along as we expose the truth behind the chaos, make sure to hit that subscribe button, Scandal Pulse. This channel is here to peel back the curtain, highlight the scandals, and bring you the kind of insight the mainstream headlines too often water down. So, hit subscribe right now because trust me, the ride is only getting crazier from here. As Don Jr.'s testimony dragged on, the desperation was palpable. His insistence that he couldn't possibly be held accountable for financial misdeed because, after all, he had relied on major accounting firms only highlighted just how hollow his defense really was. He tried to frame himself as an innocent bystander in his own family's empire, but the effect was almost comical. In fact, it set the stage for late-night comedians who wasted no time pouncing on the absurdity. Jimmy Kimmel in particular seized the moment. Crafting punchlines that weren't just funny, they cut deeply into the Trump family's fragile self-image. He mocked Don Jr.'s strained compliments about his father, pointing out the ridiculousness of calling Trump an artist with real estate or the father of the hotel gym. These bizarre claims meant to elevate his father's legacy only served to make him look foolish. After all, how do you credit a man who has barely stepped foot in a gym as a supposed pioneer of hotel fitness centers? The courtroom may have been tense, but in the comedy world, it was pure gold. But what made this entire saga spiral out of control was not the courtroom testimony alone. It was the way the jokes collided with the digital age. As Kimmel's monologues gained traction, remix culture on TikTok and YouTube latched on. Soon, Don Jr.'s awkward mannerisms and Trump's own bombastic responses were being looped, auto-tuned, and remixed into absurd songs. One in particular, the now infamous Taco Man remix, became a viral phenomenon. What started as a joke morphed into a movement with AI-generated images of Trump dressed as a bizarre fast food dictator, complete with chicken armor and lettuce wraps. The internet crowned him not only Taco Man, but also mocked him with the acronym TUCCO, short for Trump Always Chickens Out. This wasn't just lighthearted fun. It was a cultural revolt that spread faster than any press release or legal defense the Trump team could muster. The meme storm would have been bad enough for most politicians, but Trump, known for his fragile ego and inability to let even the smallest slide, only made it worse. At a press event, when a reporter dared to bring up the Taco Man nickname, Trump lost his composure. Instead of brushing it off with humor or ignoring it, he snapped, calling it a nasty question. That single moment caught on video and replayed endlessly became symbolic of the deeper issue. A man who had once commanded global authority now unraveling over a silly nickname. And once the internet sees that weakness, it never lets go. The more he fumed, the more the memes multiplied until it seemed the entire online world was laughing at his expense. For someone so obsessed with image and dominance, it was devastating. But the story didn't stop at memes and late-night laughs. Behind the scenes, Rolling Stone reported that Trump's White House had taken the extraordinary step of making calls to Disney executives demanding they rein in Jimmy Kimmel. Imagine that. The President of the United States, the man entrusted with nuclear codes, leaning on staff to call Disney over late-night jokes. It was so absurd that Kimmel himself could hardly believe it. He turned Trump's outrage into more material, quipping that Trump had acted like President Karen, demanding to speak to the manager. The line struck a nerve because it was true. Here was a man who had once tried to bend the Department of Justice to his will, now raging at being mocked by a comedian on network television. The optics couldn't have been worse. And yet, the absurdity kept piling higher. Trump sat for an interview with Univision, hoping to appeal to Latino voters, but the result was another catastrophe. Questions about Stormy Daniels, his marriage to Melania, and even his eating habit became fodder for further ridicule. Instead of projecting strength, he looked defensive, awkward, and completely out of touch. The parody versions of this interview spread like wildfire, feeding into the already uncontrollable meme culture surrounding him. In a single week, Trump had gone from attempting to control the narrative to becoming its punchline. Meanwhile, his children weren't spared either. Don Jr. and Eric were painted as overgrown children themselves, mocked as if they still had book reports due while being dragged into fraud trials. Their appearances at events with Trump, like the UFC fight at Madison Square Garden, where they posed alongside Tucker Carlson and Kid Rock, only highlighted how surreal their inner circle had become. Instead of presenting themselves as serious political errors, they looked like caricatures straight out of a reality TV parody banana Republicans grinning in coordinated shirts while their empire burned. And then came the bigger consequences, the ones that extended far beyond comedy. While Trump obsessed over memes and punchlines, his trade policies were quietly unraveling American manufacturing. Doubling tariffs on steel and aluminum may have played well in rallies, but it backfired economically. Automakers and manufacturers shifted operations overseas, particularly to China, undermining the very America First agenda he claimed to champion. In practice, it became America lost as factories closed, costs soared, and supply chains left the U.S. behind. All the while, Trump wasn't focused on fixing the damage. He was too busy posting rants about being bullied by comedians. This mismatch between personal ego and national responsibility is what makes a saga so chilling beneath the humor. If a late-night joke can provoke such a meltdown, what happens when the stakes are higher when it's a foreign leader, a Supreme Court ruling, or an international crisis? Trump has shown time and again that ridicule cuts deeper to him than policy failures. His tantrums are not just embarrassing, they raise legitimate questions about stability and leadership. And that's why the Tucker Man saga isn't just a meme, it's a warning. The story culminated in the courtroom once again, where Trump now faces potential fines in the hundreds of millions. Legal scholars may debate technicalities, but the public sees something else entirely. A man unraveling, a dynasty cracking under pressure, and a family so desperate to spin reality that they become trapped inside a parody of their own making. And as Jimmy Kimmel, late-night host, and meme makers continue to chip away at his carefully constructed image, it becomes increasingly clear that Donald Trump's greatest enemy isn't the prosecutors, the politicians, or even the press. It's his own inability to laugh at himself, his own obsession with controlling a narrative that has already slipped through his fingers. As the courtroom drama continued, the tension didn't just reside in the words spoken on the stand. It was in every pause, every nervous glance, and every awkward attempt by Don Jr. to navigate questions he clearly didn't fully understand. The cameras captured a man who seemed part reality star, part beleaguered witness, and part comic foil, all wrapped into one. While outside, protesters amplified the sense of spectacle, chanting crime family as if it were a drumbeat, underscoring the absurdity unfolding within. Meanwhile, Ivanka, though formally removed from proceedings, remained a silent presence in the narrative. Her carefully curated public persona providing a star-arc contrast to her father and brother's flailing attempts at justification, and her absence in court became a story in itself, a tacit acknowledgement that even the family recognized the peril of associating too closely with a rapidly collapsing legal defense. Yet, The saga only grew more surreal as social media amplified every stumble, every pause, every bizarre statement into memes and remixes with Tucko Man imagery and AI-generated caricatures turning the family into characters in a dystopian counselor. While Trump himself oscillated between outrage and obsession, issuing public statements, posting furious tweets, and reportedly making calls to media executives in an attempt to suppress the humor, highlighting a man so desperate to control perception that he would leverage the power of the presidency to influence private corporations. An action that only fueled the narrative of a leader unhinged by ridicule and incapable of distinguishing personal affront from matters of state. As the day has passed, even routine appearances, whether at sporting events or public rallies, were scrutinized, dissected, and transformed into symbolic markers of a dynasty under siege, with Eric and Don Jr. photographed grinning in matching attire, participating in staged events that felt more like performative theater than political engagement. Their youthful naivety and awkward enthusiasm juxtaposed against a backdrop of legal jeopardy, viral ridicule, and media scrutiny, ultimately illustrating that the Trump family struggles were not confined to the courtroom or the late-night stage, but permeated every public moment, every carefully composed photograph, every speech, and every meme, creating a complex, almost Shakespearean drama of hubris, miscalculation, and relentless public scrutiny where the line between political strategy, personal ego, and sheer entertainment blurred, leaving a nation captivated, confused, and in many cases laughing at the spectacle. While the family's attempts to regain control seemed increasingly futile in the face of digital culture's unrelenting, merciless amplification of every error, misstep, and overreaction, a modern cautionary tale of power, perception, and the unpredictable consequences of living life in the public eye without the capacity for restraint or humility.